Of course, when you bring this scientific evidence up to people who are okay with the murder of a child, they will ignore it and appeal to philosophy. Now, where have I seen this tactic before of ignoring science and appealing to philosophy?
So every time someone points out that a question is a philosophical one rather than a scientific one, they're no better than creationists? Do you really believe there is no circumstance in which it is legitimate to judge an issue to be philosophical rather than scientific? The question of what constitutes murder is a moral question, and morality is not a fucking science. Science can provide useful information to those considering moral questions, but it cannot ultimately decide them.
If it doesn't work with young Earth theories, it won't work here as well.
Non-fucking sequitur. Most young Earth theories make no assertions about morality at all.
But they try to say, well, a fetus is not a person. The genetic existence of a human may begin at conception, but it is not a person yet. But to do this would just be to make up an ad hoc definition.
Since it is the case that most of us would consider the arbitrary killing of a self-aware non-human to be murder, it is clear that defining murder only as the killing of an innocent human is not adequate. It's obviously not that simple. We need to distinguish between personhood and humanity in order to deal with this problem. That's why this definition is not ad hoc. It is not arbitrary. It is not because we say so, it's because your definition of murder doesn't fucking work.
And this philosophical view can lead to very devastating consequences.
You are explicitly making an argument ad consequentium here.
One only needs to open a history book and see what happened the last time a group of people decided another group of people were not actually people and not worthy of life and liberty.
Defining personhood as self-awareness would not lead to anyone being denied any rights that they have the capacity to value. Also, the concept of personhood, while excluding some humans, could include entities other than humans. If IP believes that rights are contingent upon merely membership in the human species, then on what moral ground could IP say that it is wrong to enslave an intelligent extraterrestrial? If IP agrees that it would be wrong to enslave an alien, then he clearly understands that rights are granted for reasons other than merely being human. Bestowing legal recognition of personhood at birth provides a clear and consistent standard without morally or legally obligating anyone to give birth against their will. Forcing someone to endure that for the sake of the tiny cluster of cells that make up a zygote is not something my conscience can tolerate.
Some say because the fetus is not conscious yet, it is not a person. And how do they know this? Because they do not have the experience or knowledge of you or me? Lack of knowledge doesn't mean someone is not a person. People in vegetative states have very low IQs, and no one says they are not persons.
The reason we don't treat people in temporary states of unconsciousness, like a coma, as though they have no rights is because this would exacerbate the fear most of us have of ending up in such a state. In other words, it would increase the suffering of those of us who are still conscious. It is for this reason that people who are temporarily unconscious ought to still be treated as persons. Abortion does not have the same ability to disturb our peace of mind because none of us has to worry about ending up as a fetus, and fetuses have no capacity to understand or fear their own mortality.
In consciousness, it's much harder to define, and we have good evidence it is fundamental and not a later developed process.
How can you give good evidence regarding something you have trouble even defining?
So for instance, let's suppose we define a person to be someone who is capable of intentional action. Well, guess what? Science is not on the side of abortion advocates in this case either. Even though consciousness in fetuses is very hard to study, by 14 weeks of age, there is undeniable evidence that fetuses display intentions, and by definition, would be persons.
Who uses that definition, though? I don't. By that definition, many non-human animals would be persons. Mice would be persons. I don't think it's enough that the organism be conscious. I think personhood should be contingent upon having a self-concept, rather than merely being conscious. Also, by the definition IP is addressing, an embryo without a nervous system would still not be a person. None of these assertions about the consciousness of the fetus explain why it is wrong to kill a zygote that doesn't even have a nervous system yet.